And my name is Kurt, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, celebrating recovery over codependency. Hey guys. When I came to my first Celebrate Recovery meeting, October of 2008, 9, I didn't know I was a codependent. I came because I was going through my third divorce. I couldn't blame anyone else any longer. There was something wrong with me, and I couldn't change myself. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and 1,000 words about 8 minutes. So let me just paint a picture of what my life was like before Celebrate Recovery. People have their their life verses from the Bible. This is mine. So if you've ever heard of the website called despair.com, they take motivational pictures like you see in an office, but then they make them with a reality type message. So my life verse actually came from that website. And it's a picture of an ocean, a very gentle ocean with the sun setting behind it, and there's a ship on the water, and the only problem with it, it's a cargo ship, and it's sunk. The only thing you're seeing is the front half of the ship sticking out of the water. And then underneath it says in big bold letters, mistakes. Small print. Maybe the purpose of your life is to serve as a warning to others. 10 years before I found recovery, I said, I found my life first. But that's how I saw myself. It's dark sarcasm. It's the way I was raised. But more importantly, that's how I saw myself. And going on. So I'm from Wisconsin. I was raised Lutheran. My sister and I don't have many memories of our childhood. But one thing we do remember, our families on both sides, my parents' house was the place that everybody wanted to come to for parties. We hugged everybody. Everybody laughed. We always had a good time. Everybody felt better. And my parents were good people, but they had issues with anger and other issues that they never sought help for. And when they were angry, they said things that they heard when they were growing up. And I wasn't old enough to understand that, so I believed what they said. That I was stupid and I couldn't do anything right, and I was never going to amount to anything. Nobody would want me. I was unlovable. So I hated school more with each passing year, rarely getting grades higher than a C. And I joined the Air Force within weeks of graduating from high school, and after a short assignment in Virginia, I received orders to the Philippines. I knew what was waiting for me before I even left to go to the Philippines, and I believed at that point, because of my religious beliefs and being raised Lutheran and going to a Lutheran school, that would keep me from the bar scene. I lasted about 24 hours. And as I said earlier, I was raised Lutheran. And now 10 months after I arrived, I find myself in a Pentecostal servicemen center. Now, for those of you who have never been to a Pentecostal church, or may have never been to a Lutheran service, there's how can you say this? There's a subtle difference between the two doctrines. It kind of jumps out if you're a newbie. I never experienced anything like that service before. I loved the music service, but I'd never heard a more terrifying sermon. God grabbed me from the pew, and when I say that, I mean it. He literally grabbed me from the pew. Pastor House, at the end of the sermon, told everybody to bow their head and pray, and so I'm going, thank God I'm going to get out of here. Those of you who have heard the message know you're going to hell, raise your hand. Oh man, I just need to get out of here. I just need to get out of here. What the? And I realized my hand's in the air. I didn't tell my hand to go up. And so I'm trying to get my arm to come down. It won't come down. I had to pull my arm down. Then I heard a voice behind me say, well, just go up to the front. I turned around to tell that nice individual to mind their own business, but I was in the back row and there was nobody behind me. So my panic level kind of went up exponentially after that. Then he said, okay, for those of you who raise your hands, please come forward and receive prayer. I'm thinking to myself, I just want to get out of here, God. I'll do anything. Just get me out of here. It's not the prayer you pray in a Pentecostal servicemen center. I'm just going to say that. A few seconds later, I realize again something's wrong. Open my eyes, and I'm halfway down the aisle. I'm going, when did I leave the pew? You know, what's going on? When I got there, a man that I had never seen before asked me something that nobody in my life had ever asked. It was simply this: what can I pray with you for? And I didn't know what to say. My parents had never asked me that. My pastors had never asked me that. I didn't know what to say. I just remember saying I need help. The next thing I remember, I'm walking back to the pew. I don't know how much time had gone by, but I don't feel anything. I'd had a headache for weeks, months before that, and I didn't feel that headache anymore. I didn't really feel anything. I didn't know what had happened. I asked Noah later, his name was Noah, I said, did I pass out? He goes, no, you just sat there and we prayed and then you walked off. I'm like, typical, you know. But the point is, I bring this up in details because when you're new to Celebrate Recovery, like Richard was saying, you're coming in and you're in pain. That's all you see and that's all you feel. And if you're new to recovery and you hear serenity, it's real. So if you're not in serenity at this point, you just need to keep coming back, because I found it in recovery. You can find it also. Romans 5:20 says, but where sin increased, grace increased all the more. Acts 2:44 says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. After 2.5 years in the Philippines, I was there for 9 months, then 2.5 years up in Japan, another serviceman center. I returned to the States in 86, and I was convinced that God had a ministry especially just for me. But within weeks, I found myself walking away from everything I'd experienced when I was overseas. Now, when I say I walked away from everything I experienced, I'm not talking about church. I'm not talking about, the place you go to once or twice a week. You go through the sermon, you go through the song services, you leave, and you don't see anybody or interact with anybody that you see here until you come back here again. That's not what it was like overseas. So let me give you an idea what it was like. Why I'm in a church where my hands are going up in the air against my will. There was about 40,000 prostitutes within 2 miles of the base. 40,000 prostitutes within 2 miles of the base. That was their only ticket out of the Philippines to get an American to marry them. They don't really know how many were there. They just estimated it at 40,000 because those were the ones that went into the clinics to get treated and register. So, where sin abounds, grace abounds more. That's why I put that verse in there before. Is you need to understand the context behind what it was like in those churches overseas. I have yet to find anything like it here. Everybody in that church, we were everything to everybody. We were on the other side of the world. We were away from everybody and everything we knew. You couldn't go off base and say, I can just blend in, disappear. I was 1.5 to 2 feet taller than anybody off base, and when people were around me and I took my shirt off to wipe off some sweat, people would drop to their knees with flash burns. So I couldn't exactly blend into the crowd. So the verse that Peter writes about being an alien in a foreign country, that really took home with us. And we were closer to each other than anything I'd ever experienced. I grew up with a form of godliness, but never knew his power. How does Donnie say it? Fire-breathing, believer of God, daughter of God. Can you imagine going to a church and there's 20 or 30 of those? 20 or 30 out of 40 people in the church? That's the kind of church that we were in when we were overseas. Again, I go into the detail because that's where my guilt comes from. That's the source of my guilt. How could I walk away from that? How could I walk away from a reality in which I saw God do incredible things within me and within people, to just completely walking away from it and pursuing a form of godliness by going to church, but never really trying to capture back the reality that I knew when I was overseas? The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? The Lord searches the heart and tests the mind to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. Jeremiah 17:9-10. I was 23 years old when I left Japan, and within days of my return, I asked my high school girlfriend to marry me. But I panicked several weeks after that when I arrived at my next base in Fort Worth. Instead of talking with her or waiting to go back up and talk with her face to face, I sent her a Jill letter. I didn't even have the courage to call. I did it because I didn't feel anything for her, so I ended the relationship and never looked back. The guilt in that decision was put on top of the guilt for my spiritual abandoning God. And these followed me into each relationship I entered afterward. And I can sum up, I was married and divorced 3 times before I came to recovery, but because I'm a blonde man from Wisconsin, I didn't quite get it when I first came into recovery, so I had to go up to the ticket and ask for another ticket on the insanity cycle mountain. So I went a 4th time. And I bring that up because just coming to CR is not enough to change your life. You have to actually do what God tells you to do in these meetings. And I didn't get that. So God said, okay, fine, 1 more trip around the mountain. But each of the marriages failed because I didn't want to be alone. I was impulsive. I couldn't wait for God. I had to do it now. It was from a fear-based reaction. And a fear based on lies that I was told as a child that I was unlovable. And I grew up believing I had to earn someone else's love, that the only way they would love me is if I did things for them or took care of them. I didn't even know who the real me was. And that's one of the joys of codependency. You focus so much on somebody else, you don't know anything about your own needs. You're the guy that stands in the store while his wife is asking you, what do you want to get at the store? What kind of a shirt or pants? Well, whatever you want. A codependent is the guy that says to his wife, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? Wherever you want to go. Well, where do you want to go? That's what happens when you're married to a codependent and you're a codependent. Nobody can make a decision. And as a man, it was difficult because I wasn't able to lead, because I was always looking to her. So when things were going good in my life, my conscience would tell me, you don't deserve this. This isn't going to last. She's going to leave you. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When things were bad, it would say, you deserve this. You left God. You had premarital sex. You know that was a sin. You did it again. Then you married her. You think God's going to forgive you this time? Did he forgive you last time? My conscience would even use God's word, twisting scriptures such as Peter's warning that it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than to have known it and then turn their backs on sacred commands, and to have a form of godliness but denying its power, always learning but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Suppression is a defense mechanism. You stop yourself from thinking and feeling anything negative. I learned at a young age to lock up my emotions. I didn't know that was unhealthy. That was the only way that I could cope with my mom's verbal abuse. It was the only, so I unknowingly brought them into every relationship. One of the worst aspects of codependency, like I said, is not, you don't know who the real you is, because the real me never had a chance to develop. My childhood was keeping my mom from yelling at me. That was it. If I could make her laugh, great, then she wouldn't be mad at me. If I got good grades, great, then she wouldn't be mad at me. My mom was an emotional roller coaster because of the things that she went through. And I was unconsciously drawn to that. And each of my wives had a lot of the same attributes my mom did. That's what we do. We go after the people that we knew when we were kids. I didn't know I was not in a healthy relationship. Each of my wives tried in their own way to get through the wall that I had built up as a child to protect myself. But you can't let somebody in if you can't see why you're keeping them out. That's what denial does. So you remember my demotivational image about the mistakes. No matter how many times I wished I had made different decisions, I could never rewrite my past. But God has used Celebrate Recovery not to change my past, but to change how I view it. Psalms 139:16 says, your eyes saw me before I was born and scheduled each day of my life before I began to breathe. Each day was recorded in your book. I came across this verse when I was preparing for my Journey Continues 4th step, inventory. Now the 4th step gets a bad rap. People hear it and they panic. You know, what's going to happen? Fear is something everybody has to face. If you're in recovery, you have to face your fears. And that's what the inventory does. And the inventory is nothing more than a to-do list. You're just writing down information about things that have already happened. You're having to face your own fears. You have to face what you did. It's simple, but it's powerful. And sometimes people get scared because they don't know what they're going to be like when they get to the other side of it. Well, I can tell you from personal experience what you'll be like when you get to the other side of it. You'll be changed. Nothing in life is easy except quitting or going the wrong way. If you want your life to change, you have to put in the work. Everybody who goes to the fourth step, like I said, faces the same thing. You have to be willing to deeply look at who you are. And that's really the most challenging part of our recovery. You can't change until you know what needs to be changed. If you haven't taken your first 12-step class, I encourage you to talk with the leaders here tonight and sign up for one. If you want your life to change, that's where it happens. Recovery is very simple. You do very simple things. What makes it difficult is fear. And when you realize that everybody who's gone through the program faced the same fears, it's a little bit easier because you know, like we all do, we're not alone. Amen. So as I was doing this inventory, and the journey continues, and reading that verse, it really got me thinking, because I kept a journal for most of my adult life. And I still use it. I still write in it. I still refer back to it. And I always wondered, if God has an actual book about my life, what's he written in it? And I joke with my friends. I said, and what would it be classified under? Would it be comedy, horror, drama? All of them? Horror, yeah, definitely. But God is outside time as we know it. And when he looks at me, he not only sees who I am now, but he sees who I was and who I'm going to become. He sees everything, including all the ripple effects my life will have upon others. And the fourth step always provided me a map to where God was taking me, but the journey continues, gave me a roadmap of where I'd come from. And what I mean is, if you're lost in life and you don't know where you're going, you need 2 points of reference. You look at this point, you look at the other point, and you can say, this is where I was, this is where I am now, so I'm going in this direction, and I can draw a straight line, and that's where I'm going to be. True. With the inventory, you can also draw it that way. You can look at your past, and that's what the journey continues did. All the different things that I was doing now in recovery, I asked myself, where did these things begin? What was the turning point in my life that actually that thing started? And using the inventory, I was able to trace back through time to see how God's Spirit had actually been preparing me since my very early years in elementary school for what he's now leading me toward. Working the fourth step always changed the way I saw my past, but it also opened the door for healing. Now, earlier I shared my spiritual conversion in the Philippines, but let me share with you a portion of the fictional journal that I wrote during that Journey Continues class, and what I believe God might have written about that time of my life from his perspective. June 28, 1983, Kurt arrived in the Philippines today. It's going to hurt seeing him walk away from me tomorrow night and losing him to the temptations of off base. But I know this is the path he must walk if he is to return to me like the prodigal son he has now become. August 7th, Kurt has called his parents this afternoon. It was their first contact with him since he left over 2 months ago. So complete was his fall into sin, he never even thought to send them a letter to let them know he arrived in the Philippines safely. I brought one of my servants into his life yesterday. Gene's friendship and love for me will break through the darkness growing within Kurt's heart. March 22nd, 1984, Kurt is looking for me, but he doesn't know how to find me. And he believes I will not forgive him. Earlier today, I allowed Kurt to receive a vision from the enemy of his soul. In it, he saw himself standing on the edge of a cliff. And as the ground below him began falling underneath him, he heard a voice say, "You can jump." May 13th, 1984, Kurt met Gene at his church today. He loved the music ministry. I spoke from Romans chapter 1, the sins of the flesh. My words opened his heart to see where his life was taking him, and it terrified him. I told him that even though I loved him more than he would ever understand, his sins were leading him to an eternity without me. When the altar call invitation was given, he was too scared to raise his hand, so I raised his arm for him. When Pastor House called him to come forward, he ordered his body to stand still. I did. But I can't let his fear keep him from me. This is the day I've made for him to surrender his heart to me. When he closed his eyes, I made his legs bring him to me. Rejoice with my angels as Kurt gave me his heart. took away his sins and the headaches he had suffered with since the vision of the cliff. I gave him a brief touch of the serenity that's found only in me. This memory will anchor him to me through the years and bring him back to me when his time is fulfilled. June 28th, 1984. If any man serves me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. John 12:26. It's been 1 year since he arrived here. I spoke this verse to him today during our morning devotion. He's going to receive his official orders from the Air Force in a few hours. He believes I'm sending him close to Wisconsin, but my ways are not his. I'm sending him to northern Japan. There are many people I need to reach there, and he'll be an important part of my plan. He doesn't see himself as I see him. He doesn't believe he is able to do the things I'm asking of him. My strength will be made perfect within his weakness. January 18th, 1984, Kurt arrived in Misawa, Japan today. It'll take him a few weeks. Misawa, Japan's the very northern tip of Honshu, so it's like in the middle of Canada, southern Canada. January. He'll feel underwhelmed when he enters the church building. It's going to be dark, cold, small. The only music will be from the organ the pastor's wife is playing. And even though the reasons that I sent him there are obvious, he won't see it until he returns to the Philippines in May for a spiritual revival. May 12, 1985. 1 year ago yesterday, Kurt gave me his heart in this very sanctuary. While listening to the beautiful music, worship band was playing at the revival. Kurt complained, "Why isn't the music like this up there?" And then I heard this voice cut right through my mind going, "What are you doing about it? I sent you there for a reason. Do something with what you've been given." June 2nd, 1985, Kurt purchased the drum set for the church and began playing today. His actions inspired others to pick up their instruments and join the pastor's wife on stage. Kurt's left his comfort zone and saying yes to opportunities I'm opening for him. Soon he will join the bass gospel choir. Can you imagine a blonde man from Wisconsin in a black gospel choir? You're looking at the original Yes Man. I got photos to prove it. Probably surprised God. He's also teaching the adult Bible study in his church. His ability to connect lessons to his personal experiences is helping others apply my word within their lives. August 24th, 1986, Kurt is preparing for his next step, his assignment to Fort Worth. During a prayer meeting last month, I shared a vision of Kurt's future with the visiting pastor. He told Kurt he saw him speaking before large groups of people. Now, outwardly, Kurt's excited about this next assignment, but I see his heart. I know he'll soon leave me and enter the wilderness everybody must go through if they're going to reach the dream that I placed within their hearts. Hold on to your life verse, Kurt. It'll bring you back to me. One of the earlier entries that I didn't include was the life verse, which was Proverbs 3:5-6. That's really my life verse. September 3rd, 1986, Kurt's buried pain has kept him from truly trusting me. He doesn't trust anyone, not even himself. He's still hiding his pain from me, and although I'll never leave his side, he's not going to feel the intimacy we've shared here in Japan for another 23 years. I'll miss him in the time that we've shared, and when he returns to me, he'll find me there ready to embrace him. October 19th, 2009, I was waiting for Kurt at a Celebrate Recovery meeting tonight. It was his first meeting. This time, I didn't have to make him walk to me. I was there to hug him when he picked up his chip. He's ready for his next step. And those are some of the entries that I wrote, believing that's what God could have written in his journal about my life. So I'm just going to ask you simply, what has God written in yours? Each of us has a book. And like Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone, the new is here. It doesn't matter to God who we were before we found him or what brought you into these meetings. The only thing that matters to him is what we're going to do today, what we're going to do with what he's given us. Celebrate Recovery is built on really complicated principles such as keep coming back, take it one day at a time, wait upon God, don't make a decision for 6 months, have a sponsor, do a 12-step. If you haven't been in a 12-step for over a year, get into another 12-step. Really radically difficult concepts. What makes it difficult is believing that God is actually going to change us. Is that really all I have to do? And after almost 10 years in recovery, after all the layers that he's peeled off on me over the 5 12 steps I've been through, that's where I'm at tonight. God, are you really there? He is. Amen. Convincing myself is the challenge. That's why I keep coming back. Because I need to have that positive reinforcement in my life. I need to be around positive people who are on the journey that I'm in. I need to have a sponsor that I can go to, knowing that he's my closest friend. You can't get this outside of recovery. God has a dream and a plan for your life, but he's not going to give it to you until you're ready for it. So get into a 12-step class. If it's been more than a year since you've been in one, get into another one. God, you celebrate recovery to change my life. You can change yours also. Do what you hear in these rooms and keep coming back, expecting your life to change. In this time, it will.